You're listening to Dakota Spotlight. My name is James Wallner. Guys, I recently listened to a fascinating podcast from Pushkin Industries, and today I'm excited to share a conversation I had with investigative reporters Hayley Fox and Betsy Shepard about their podcast, Valley of Shadows. And following my interview with them, you'll hear episode 1 of this great podcast. Valley of Shadows focuses on the 1998 disappearance of Los Angeles County Sheriff's Deputy Jon Aujay. He went out for a run in a remote area of Southern California and never returned. But if you're thinking, missing hiker in an unforgiving terrain, just hang on. The deeper they go, the more complicated it all gets. There are questions and allegations of corruption within the sheriff's department. And even now, decades later, a former law enforcement officer continues to fight for answers. It's a great podcast series, and I was very excited to speak with the creators, Hayley Fox and Betsy Shepard. Also joining on this call was Mari Zoerb Hansen, who often assists me with research here at Dakota Spotlight. So, first our conversation, and then right after that, episode 1 of Valley of Shadows. Hayley and Betsy, thank you so much for joining us on Dakota Spotlight podcast. How are you two today?
Thanks for having us, James. We are thrilled to be here. We have so much to talk about with you.
We do. I've been binging your show the last few days, Valley of Shadows. It's a fantastic show. I can't believe the twists and turns. Can you tell us how you got into this story or fell into it, however it happened in the first place?
Sure. So, Hayley and I are both investigative reporters who have done a lot of work on, in the true crime genre, disappearances, unsolved murders, that kind of stuff. And, have developed relationships with law enforcement. But I was reaching out about a different story, actually, and contacted the person who really introduced us to the Jon Aujay saga. That guy's name is Mike Bauer. He is a retired captain from the LA County Sheriff's Department. He really pointed us in the direction of looking into this. It's something that he himself has personally been investigating for coming up on 30 years. And what really drew us into the story is that, law enforcement is not generally, as a group of people, they generally don't air their grievances and outrage about law enforcement to members of the press.
Right.
So that stood out to us, and the passion and conviction that he had that something untoward happened to his coworker, and that his own department was covering up what happened to Jon Aujay was really compelling. And the more we looked into it, the more we found that there was a lot of merit in what he was saying. So we started there. We started kind of using the information that Captain Bauer gave to us, and kind of went on our own investigative journey.
But you guys didn't just look into this story. I want my listeners to understand you guys are out in the field. At one point, I don't know, did you spend the night out there where this guy disappeared?
So much of this story is rooted in the place that it happened. So out in the Mojave Desert, specifically where Jon Aujay disappeared, in this park called the Devil's Punchbowl. So really being able to get out there and get the lay of the land was huge. And also being able to, use the documents and interviews and information we started to gather and be able to kind of create our own map of where things unfolded. Like you said, we did go hiking out there. We spent, I can't even count how many hours driving around out there, eating lunch out of gas stations. We camped out there in a location related to this story. We really tried to be there, again, for investigative purposes, but also because in podcasting, a lot of it can be done from anywhere. We can do it remotely. You can do it from home.
Right.
for us, really being able to capture the sound as well of these locations, the stillness of the desert, the sounds of specifically at night of what insects come alive and what the trees sound like. All of that was really important for us to not only experience, but to be able to work into the show to really give listeners an idea of where this was all happening.
Yeah, and I just want to add that, this is a story about a disappearance. And so a lot of it is like about a lack of information. And immediately, as soon as we started diving into what happened to Jon Aujay, we realized that the Mojave Desert is a character in this story. We have Jon Aujay's absence, and, we're trying to find out more about who he was and what happened to him. But right in front of us, there is the story. It's unlike any other place in America. And a key to understanding who Jon Aujay was, what he was doing when he disappeared, what might have happened to him, and all the suspicion around his disappearance, it really ties in to the setting. The desert is, we know that it's a place that's conducive to crime because it's just kind of outside the normal boundaries of society. But this part of the country is unique in that, the geography and topography of the desert landscape, in combination with some of the structural problems within the sheriff's department, has created this unique pocket of crime just north of Los Angeles in these desert towns in the Antelope Valley. And, we realized that this wasn't just a crime story about Jon Aujay. It was about, true crimes that are happening on a larger scale. And we really wanted to examine Aujay's disappearance as, kind of a case study in a lot of the stuff that's going on out there. And we called the show Valley of Shadows because this is an area that exists in this kind of moral and legal gray area. And it is a uniquely creepy place. So spending the night out there and hiking out there, which we did quite a bit for this story, it was pretty scary, but we knew that that is kind of the experience of the people that live and go out there. So we really wanted to capture that on tape and give listeners that kind of surrogate experience of what this place is about.
Also struck by how LA County, I mean, you said it took an hour and a half, I think, to get from LA to the valley, which I mean, just what a vast area LA County must be that we don't think of.
Yeah, I mean, and that was a big part of this story, and like Betsy said, which ties into the kind of problematic infrastructure of the sheriff's department and a law enforcement agency this big. But LA County is so huge. I mean, it really goes from where this story takes place in the Antelope Valley is the northernmost end. And if anyone listening is familiar with California, it goes all the way down to Long Beach. And so it is a huge area that includes not only dense cities, but all sorts of kind of vast places like this, like the Mojave Desert and like Antelope Valley where the story takes place. So that its physical remoteness does play a huge role in why crimes like this are able to happen out there too.
In fact, it's so large that, correct me if I'm wrong, but we often hear about different law enforcement agencies not collaborating or cooperating, the police don't like the FBI, the sheriff doesn't like or the FBI doesn't like the sheriff doesn't like the police department. But this county is so big, it sounds like the law enforcement who work in the desert, and it's kind of like this, we know this place, we don't need you getting in our way out here, just let us handle this. Is that accurate?
That is absolutely correct. One thing that we learned about the sheriff's department is that's particularly true of this area because it is so remote. But as we started looking more and more at the kind of work culture within the LA County Sheriff's Department, we realized that it has a very long history of cliques, as you called them. They're also known as deputy gangs, but there is kind of a turfiness within individual sheriff stations, kind of like, this is our business, let us take care of that. And what happens is when there's not a lot of sharing of information or a real rigorous structure of oversight and accountability, then that breeds corruption. And particularly in the far-flung areas like these desert communities, they're kind of, people, have described them as kind of as lawless places. And that includes, the law enforcement officers who are overseeing the areas. They kind of, can be compromised, shall we say.
And there is definitely this feeling of city cops versus country cops, sheriff's department, especially, in the elite bureaus that are located more in the central city versus the guys who are based out in divisions like this, out in the Antelope Valley. There is definitely a perceived hierarchy between the two of what they're good at and opinions of each other. So it is very interesting, like you brought up. It's not only between the departments. There is definitely that rivalry between the LAPD and the LASD and within the sheriff's department as well.
Mari, do you have any questions you want to sneak in?
I did want to ask, as someone who consumes a lot of true crime, when I hear about dogs, it's usually in the sense of cadaver dogs. And in your show, you mentioned he was obviously part of a canine unit, and then, something terrible happens to his dog. I really appreciated those details, and I wonder, how did you come into that?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, Jon Aujay's supervisor, Captain Mike Bauer, is the one who introduced us to this story. And he, in particular, he was overseeing the canine unit at the time of his disappearance, and is also just happens to be a really dedicated animal lover. And, when he talks about what happened to Jon Aujay's dog, he is also talking about what happened to Aujay, because, that is kind of the moment at which he realizes there's more to the story, because that was the first sign of some kind of cover up. And even as the captain of the canine unit, he was not privy to what happened to Aujay's dog, but finds out on his own. And that kind of becomes his entree into, looking deeper into this mystery and starting his own independent investigation.
Yeah, and just to add one thing, because this whole subject matter of the dog really hit close to home, was, like you mentioned, it's something that we're all aware of. There's canine units and, they have these partnerships. But I've been covering law enforcement for a while, I also have never really done a thorough deep dive on what those relationships are like and how they work.
Right.
And as we kind of found out the levels of closeness, how close the dogs get to the family, the partnership between the two. And just researching, like we said, finding out that they hold these ceremonies for the dogs, realizing the depths of that relationship. It was an angle that I have not uncovered before, and it surprised me as well. And so I think that was a big part of the process of reporting this story, is the stuff, the details that stuck out to us, we hoped would, have weight and relevance to people listening as well. And so it's really great to hear you say that.
I really appreciated it.
I also appreciated that. I never thought about the fact that, I guess I didn't know that they take those dogs home with them. They are together all the time, and holy cow, what a relationship. So I also appreciated that very much. So we're about to listen to this first episode, but what should listeners expect from this journey you guys went on?
The The journey that we go on throughout our investigation takes a lot of unexpected turns. In the first episode, we're really just trying to give a lay of the land and, introduce Jon Aujay and the basic details surrounding his disappearance. And give some background information, because so much of that is key to understanding what happened to him and the suspicions surrounding it. What we really wanted people to understand is that this is a nuanced story, and there are a lot of different opinions about what happened, and we kind of go into the story with a real open mind, trying to take stock of, all of these different rumors, theories, and, talking to as many people as we could about what happened before we start to kind of hone in on our, our own investigative journey.
Yeah, and I would just add too, this first episode, like Betsy said, really sets you up for the information that will come after, but that throughout the series, we really get into all sorts of different subcultures and crime environments, and it's a really kind of visceral picture of what was going on in this part of Southern California in the late 90s and early 2000s. So, Jon Aujay's case is the root of everything, but there are so many other kind of nuances we get into that by the end, I do feel like you get a really good feel for what was happening within the sheriff's department and within the rest of this area. And it was a really unique time and place. So, yeah, I would say buckle in for the rest of that too.
This is a story about someone who disappears while, hiking, jogging in the desert. And we hear about a lot of disappearances that happen, outdoors while hiking. But it's important to know that, Jon Aujay wasn't a typical hiker. He was an extremely skilled outdoorsman. He was an ultra marathon runner. When he was out there, he was training for a 100-mile ultra marathon. He knew the area like the back of his hand. He was in the prime of his life. And, so he's, it wasn't your typical missing hiker story. But also, there was a search team that was sent out almost immediately. There were witnesses that saw where he was. So from the get-go, you get a sense that, something is not right with this story of, he just went out and lost his way.
I want to tell you guys as well, I really appreciated the references to Dragnet.
Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, I've always been a sucker for crime procedurals, neo-noirs, crime thrillers. And this was really, especially I'm not from LA, but I grew up watching movies and TV shows about crime in the big city, like LA Confidential. And so, this story had so many elements that you do see in those kind of Hollywood crime movies. Yeah. And so this was a way for us to both, be kind of the hard-boiled detectives, but also explore the ways in which LA is kind of a unique setting for crime stories.
And it's just always amusing to me, and I think very telling, when law enforcement themselves refers to each other by these kind of cinematic tropes. And they are the ones that bring this, that really introduce this to the story. So yeah, right. I just love the multiple layers of reference there, but it's really amusing when law enforcement likes to view themselves as these type of characters.
I do think it's important for people to understand that this first episode is really the start of this story. Once they've listened to this first episode, where should they go to listen to the rest of your series?
You can listen to the entire series on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. The episodes are even up on YouTube if you prefer to listen that way.
Fantastic. Mari?
I remembered what I wanted to ask, which was former Captain Bauer. Has he listened to the series? Do you know?
He has listened to the series, and he was very complimentary of the show, and it means so much to us because this is in part his story. He brought it to us, and he has invested so much of his life. So, that was like it was a big responsibility. So, we were really doing our best to shepherd this story and make sure it was something that represented all of the characters, all of the subjects that entrusted us with parts of their lives that were deeply emotional, deeply personal. But yeah, he's a big fan. So, that means the world to us.
Hayley Fox and Betsy Shepard, thank you so much for talking to us today about your podcast, Valley of Shadows. We're going to play the first episode right now.
Thanks, James and Mari.
Thank you.
Pushkin. This series includes content that may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
Is this okay?
Yeah, I'll turn it down just a little bit because sometimes you get animated.
I get pissed off old cop.
This pissed off old cop is Mike Bauer.
Okay, my name is Mike Bauer, retired captain, LA Sheriff. I retired in 2002. My last assignment was Major Crimes Bureau, Detective Division, LA Sheriff.
Bauer spent 33 years climbing the ranks of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, and he looks the part of a retired captain. His white hair and mustache are neatly groomed, and his eyes are permanently fixed in a look that says, "Do not fuck up on my watch." And he's pissed off because of something that happened to one of his guys on his squad back in the summer of 1998. June 11th started off like a normal day in Los Angeles. June gloom and bad traffic.
I got up early out of Long Beach and headed up the 605 and into East LA, our office in East LA.
Bauer was doing paperwork when a call came into the front desk. The receptionist answered.
Then she hung up and she comes down to get a cup of coffee across the hall. And I said, "Hey, who was that?" It was Jon Aujay.
Jon Aujay was a 38-year-old canine cop, and he was calling to inquire about an upcoming job assignment.
I said, "Well, I've been trying to get hold of him." And she says, "Oh, well, maybe he'll call back." He never called back.
Jon Aujay was working for the unit Bauer headed up at the time, the Special Enforcement Bureau, or SEB for short.
Which consists of 7 or 8 SWAT teams. And the SWAT teams were involved in tactical responses to high-risk situations in the field.
SEB handled things like active shooter situations, hostage negotiations, search and rescue. It was a job that attracted adrenaline junkies like Aujay. He was an Army paratrooper and a survivalist. And those military skills, along with his buzz cut and square build, made him a shoo-in for the sheriff's department.
He was in the Army and Special Forces. He was working at the elite unit of the department. I have to call him a loner, but he was an elite loner because the guy was doing 50-mile runs. He was an animal.
Aujay got his kicks by going on long runs through California's backcountry. He'd go out deep into the wilderness to conquer the only obstacle course that still challenged him. And that's how Aujay was spending his day off, on June 11th, 1998. He woke up, put on his running gear, and drove to one of his favorite parks, the Devil's Punchbowl. It's a rugged canyon where the Angeles National Forest, the San Gabriel Mountains, and the Mojave Desert all converge. Aujay entered the park just before noon, used a payphone to call into the sheriff's department, and then he took off running He never listened to any music, just the sounds of nature as he jogged along a maze of switchbacks and up a nearly 10,000-foot mountain. By early evening, he looped back towards the parking lot. But as the sun began to set, the shadows of trees and rocks grew until night engulfed the park.
That evening, I got a phone call saying that Deputy Aujay is missing, that he didn't come back to his vehicle, and that they were going to start some more extensive searching for him.
It's an all-out manhunt for Jon Aujay. Every search and rescue team in LA County has been called in to help. The 38-year-old went hiking Thursday in a rugged section of the Angeles National Forest known as Devil Punchbowl Park. It's a beautiful but dangerous area, an area where it may be extremely difficult to find Aujay.
It's a pretty unique situation. The sheriff's department is called in to look for a missing hiker who's one of their own. So the search and rescue team sent out to look for Aujay consists of his friends and colleagues.
We took our teams out and deployed in two-man teams over the edges of the trails into the little nooks and crannies and the gullies that he could have slipped and fallen into.
But searchers find no trace of Aujay. It was as if he just vanished into thin air. And now, nearly 30 years later, the deputy is still missing.
I guess I'll open a box.
All that remains from Aujay's life is packed into 5 cardboard boxes. The items are wrapped in plastic, and Bauer wears gloves as he combs through them.
This is John's work jacket, and it's an SEB jacket with his name embroidered on it and Bosco, his dog. Now,
Bauer's preserving Aujay's belongings for future developments in the case.
okay, so here's his running shoes with his name on the back. Those should have some DNA in them.
The artifacts also tell us who Aujay was. There's a photo collage full of happy memories. Him and his high school sweetheart Deb on their wedding day, a birthday party for their daughter Chloe, who was just 5 when he disappeared, and puppy pics of Bosco, Aujay's department-issued canine. And next to these snapshots of domestic life, there's a steel ballistics helmet intended to stop rifle rounds, trophies for marksmanship, army fatigues, tough guy stuff. Aujay moved at a fast clip, trying to balance the competing demands of home and work. But his life came to an abrupt and puzzling end.
His death certificate says cause of death unknown, manner of death unknown. No body.
The deputy's body has never been found, which raises a lot of questions for Mike Bauer. And a survivalist getting lost in the woods? Another big question mark. Over time, the mystery of it all has turned into something else. Deep and unsettling suspicion about the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department.
The only law enforcement agency in this country that I know of, and I've looked around, who has a missing deputy sheriff and doesn't seem to care. What the hell happened? What's the answer? Who's motivated to find the answer?
And that's my cue. When Mike Bauer first told me about Aujay, I thought an unsolved disappearance involving a cop. That's unusual. But when he started talking about the sheriff's department, his department, that's when I locked in. Because you'd expect the LA County Sheriff's Department to turn over every stone to find their guy. So the claim that the LASD may have an interest in not solving the case? Now that's a story. So I called up my friend Hayley Fox. Like me, she's an investigative journalist, and she knows a lot about the sheriff's department because she's reported on it for many years.
Hey, Betsy.
How you doing?
I'm good. I'm ready.
Yeah, you want to do this?
It's about
Going
time.
a little road trip adventure?
All right, let's do it.
We've teamed up on stories before and decided to get the band back together to find answers about this missing deputy and to take on the largest sheriff's department in the country.
There's a code of silence in law enforcement. You break that code of silence, you're done. Hey, if they'll fucking kill a cop and bury him, what are they gonna do to me?
It's an obstruction of justice of a very large scale.
I'm Betsy Shepard.
I'm Hayley Fox, and this is Valley of Shadows, a show about crime and corruption in California's high desert. Episode 1, The Devil's Punchbowl. Betsy and I are making the trek from downtown Los Angeles to the Antelope Valley. That's the desert area north of LA where Deputy Aujay disappeared. The drive's about 60 miles, but it takes an hour and a half to 2 hours because of the mountainous terrain.
So you actually have to we gotta go north.
Yeah, we're gonna go north, but this is LA, dude. We gotta go south, 110 south, 5 north, 14, and then I think there's a 138 thrown in there, but nothing's a straight shot.
Spoken like a true Angelino.
I was born and raised in LA County. Go Dodgers! But this part of it feels worlds away. The Antelope Valley, or the AV as it's sometimes called, is a 3,000 square mile stretch of the Mojave. But this part of the high desert doesn't have the same allure and vibiness as places like Joshua Tree. Instead, the AV is mostly empty space, dotted with defense plants, bedroom communities, and tumbleweed towns.
So a lot of just like trailers kind of just parked out in the desert.
Yeah, I mean, power lines and scrub brush.
Our story takes place in and around Pear Blossom, California. It has a population of 1,500, and it's where the Devil's Punchbowl is located. Driving through it, Betsy gets a case of deja vu.
I get anxiety coming to places like this because it reminds me of like the town that I grew up in. I feel the oppressive weight of boredom.
Oh, really?
I moved to LA several years ago from South Louisiana. I'd never been to Antelope Valley before, but it was immediately familiar to me. Because if you were to replace desert with swamp, this region would look a lot like the small town I'm from. It's rural and kind of run down. There's more landscape than real estate. Lots of pickup trucks. And town life seems like a thing of the past.
We got an abandoned motel. What's this? Oh, like an abandoned old restaurant and rec hall. And people getting gas to presumably be on their way.
Yeah, I mean, I think the 3 gas stations in a row tell the story.
But the closer we get to the Devil's Punchbowl, where Aujay was last spotted, an otherworldly landscape appears, full of spiky Joshua trees and sandstone columns.
It's actually really beautiful out here. I did not expect it to look like this. Are you looking at these huge rocks jutting out of the ground? And like they're making all those crazy shadows?
I've never seen anything like that before.
I haven't either.
I feel like I'm in an old Western movie, like where he's got this like wide, epic landscape shots.
Oh, endless horizons, totally.
Endless horizons. I can see why Jon Aujay likes to come out here.
Yeah, it's pretty epic. Okay, we are pulling into the Devil's Punchbowl County Park parking lot.
Here we are.
We've come here to retrace Jon Aujay's last known steps, and to meet with Ranger Jack Farley. He was working at the Punchbowl the day the deputy disappeared.
Hi. Are you Jack Farley by chance?
I am.
Oh.
Are you Betsy?
I'm Betsy. This is my reporting partner, Hayley.
Oh, nice to meet you, Hayley.
Thank you for meeting us out here.
Yeah, so we're working
Jack Farley's retired now, but for 35 years he was assigned to work the Punchbowl.
What a cool job.
Great for me. Yeah, it was awesome. Good job.
It was Farley's job to keep an eye on things, to tend the grounds and patrol the area. So he noticed when Aujay became a regular at the Punchbowl, and he clocked Aujay's regular parking space, the one closest to the trailhead.
So I can remember seeing him sitting in the back of his truck when he'd get done with a run in the mountains. So when I'd walk out into the parking lot, I'd see him sitting out there and ask him about his run.
Farley remembers that the day Aujay disappeared, his white Ford F-150 truck was parked in that very same spot, surrounded on all sides by wilderness.
One thing that impresses us so much about this area is that you have a desert landscape on one side, you have mountains and forest on the other, and then in between it's these really cool rock formations.
Right, it's all uplifted from earthquake activity.
Oh, wow.
That's Punchbowl Fault, and that runs parallel with the mountains. And then when you came up the hill, you cross the San Andreas Fault, which is, of course, the big one that runs through California. Several faults in the area. It took all this sand that was laid down flat by streams and tilted it up into vertical relief.
And it creates a bowl shape.
You can see a definite bowl shape coming around like this, so that's where it got the Punchbowl name.
We're not totally sure about the devil part of it, though. According to local lore, early homesteaders saw a grinning devil in the rock formations. We didn't see Satan in the rock face, but we did see something else, thanks to a county park employee named Dave Newmer.
See this right where the shadow ends? There's that big rock kind of all by itself. If you look, it's like a forehead is facing us and there's a nose pointing straight.
Kind of looks like George Washington.
Yeah, it's a natural Mount Rushmore.
Cool.
Yeah, so there's all kinds of faces out here because it's like, oh, our brains are programmed to see patterns.
Pattern recognition is why we see gods and goddesses in the stars, and the man in the moon. It's also a key part of criminal investigations, a way to turn information into a story. And that's why we've come to the Devil's Punchbowl, to see if we can make sense of what happened on June 11th, 1998. So we pull out a map we printed from the internet, because we're prepared journalists and elder millennials, and we present it to Ranger Farley.
Let me show you what it looks like.
Yeah, mine will definitely be better.
This will definitely get us lost in the wilderness, but it was a good thought. Farley proves his outdoor prowess by whipping out some real maps of the area to help orient us to our surroundings.
Okay, here's the Devil's Punch.
Okay.
And there's Burkhart Trail right there. Goes over toward Devil's Chair, so that'd be just to the east. Goes to South Fork.
One witness reported seeing Aujay near the picnic tables at the main trailhead sometime before noon. This witness was a local teacher there on a field trip with a bunch of elementary school kids. Aujay stopped to talk to him. He pointed to a jagged mountain in the distance, Mount Baden-Powell, and said that's where he was headed.
So the high mountain behind the telephone pole over there,
Yeah?
that's Baden-Powell, and that's where he would go sometimes, to the top of that.
How tall is that mountain?
Jeez, that is one of the higher ones. Let me think.
Oh, really?
10,000? I mean, in this range.
And he would run from here to that mountain all the way over there and then run up it?
Yeah, he'd run over there, and then there's switchbacks all the way to the top of that mountain.
Aujay was spotted again later in the day, when multiple witnesses say they saw him jogging through a campground just north of the mountain, in the direction of the Punchbowl parking lot. But when Farley left his post at 5 p.m., Aujay's truck was still parked in the lot. And it stayed parked there as the evening bloomed over the desert. And then, close to midnight, Aujay's wife called the sheriff's station to report him missing.
As June 11th, 1998 nears its end, Debbie Aujay becomes increasingly panicked because her husband, Deputy Jon Aujay, told her he'd be home around dark, and by now he's several hours late. So she dials up one of the sheriff's stations where Aujay worked.
The call comes into the desk, and it's from Debbie, and it says, hey, my husband, who's a deputy, he went for a run and he didn't come home.
Vince Burton was a sergeant in the Antelope Valley. He was also Aujay's colleague and friend. So he gets on the phone with Debbie.
She was just upset. She was crying. She was obviously very concerned. I said, okay, Debbie, we're sending people up there, keep you posted.
Patrol deputies hightail it to the Punchbowl, where they find Aujay's truck, but no Aujay. They think maybe he got injured, slipped and fell, or had a run-in with some wildlife. So Burton dispatches search and rescue to the site, and he calls in their coordinator, Dave Sauer, to discuss Aujay's likely route.
And Dave comes in and we pull up a map of the area. And I told him at that time, I said, John's a runner. And he goes, yeah. And I said, no, he's a long distance runner. He's an ultra marathoner. And he's like, what?
Ultra marathoners are running extremists who power through long distances. In fact, Aujay was scheduled to compete in a 100-mile run the week after he went missing. So responders have a hard time wrapping their heads around the scale of the search.
I gave them the best information I could give them, don't start your grid pattern so small.
This is Randy Megardly. He was a patrol deputy for the sheriff's department and one of Aujay's running buddies. He reiterates to the command post that Aujay was a beast.
You're running goat trails is basically what I categorize them as.
What do you mean by that? Goat trails?
Well, they're just makeshift trails. Sometimes they'll be covered with snow. Sometimes they'll be covered with mud, crossing rivers. I mean, it's crazy what kind of stuff that we were doing. There was one that we did, it was hand over foot trying to get up this mountain.
Wow. And so part of the activity was figuring out how to get to the end of it.
Yeah, in one piece.
Hearing Megardly talk about ultramarathoners, it sounds like they have no off switch. So maybe Aujay just overdid it.
Your brain does some wonky stuff when you're dehydrated. And they thought maybe he got on a trail and he was doing the Forrest Gump, just kept running.
That's a theory, that Aujay was doing the Forrest Gump and just kept running and got himself into a tailspin of dehydration. Responders take note and fan out across the search grid.
I was nice to him. I said, I know the area pretty well if you guys want help.
Ranger Jack Farley again.
And the guy goes, no, we're search and rescue. We pretty much know what we're doing, So I go, okay.
But it doesn't take long for the pros to realize they're in over their heads.
So then they're going, hey, are you the guy that knows the area? Maybe you could give us a little help.
So Farley leads a few groups of deputies and bloodhounds down the local trails.
At one time thought they caught a scent, and it went up on the trail going toward the Burkhart Trail, and we had talked about someone saying they heard a gunshot. You can't see the house from here, but it's like a half mile below the trail up there where the people live that said they heard that.
The dogs pick up a scent, possibly Aujay's, on a trail that's near a local resident. That guy reported to searchers that he heard a single gunshot at sunset the day Aujay vanished. It's a detail the sheriff's department registers as a potential clue.
So I took a group of deputies over there and we went down really rugged, wooded canyon. They didn't find anything.
But searchers do spot some footprints on the mountain where Aujay told people he was going. So Aujay's Captain Mike Bauer takes to the skies to see where they lead.
And that was the first time I ever stepped out of a huge helicopter on the side of a mountain with one skid touching, and then that helicopter flew off while we examined the openings of Bighorn Mine to see whether or not it had been broken into.
Bighorn is a mine on top of the mountain, left over from the gold rush days. Its entrance has been welded shut to keep out hikers. And when the helicopter lands 90s action movie style, Bauer's crew finds no signs of a break-in. Aujay's reported missing late Thursday night. By the end of the day Sunday, the sheriff's department kicks things into high gear. They call in the U.S. Army and Air Force, along with the LASD heavy hitters. It's a specialized squad called Emergency Services Detail, or ESD.
They do search and rescue, underwater search and recovery, and they support the special weapons team with medical skills.
Dave Rathbun was one of the ESD members sent out to search for Aujay.
And the adrenaline that you get from ESD is different from any other adrenaline.
ESD deputies are equipped to handle all types of emergency scenarios. But it wasn't just the rocky ledges and wild animals they had to worry about here. The area was full of all kinds of criminal activity.
One of the things they told our search teams on day one was Jon may have stumbled into a meth lab by accident. So that was told to us when we were out searching. And the reason they told us is they recommended we take weapons.
Rathbun and his team of searchers come to the Punchbowl armed and ready for action. Because maybe Aujay isn't lost or injured or running for the hills. Maybe he's the victim of foul play. The command post doesn't expand on why they thought Aujay may have been taken out by meth-related violence. But to Rathbun, this theory doesn't sound too far-fetched. Because the Antelope Valley is isolated, outlawish, and on account of its size, difficult to police.
There are a lot of people who just don't want to be around other human beings out there, which makes them sometimes dangerous. There's people cooking meth. It was a little bit like the Old West in a way. I mean, this is a very unusual, strange place.
And remember that abandoned mine searchers scoped out? Well, it turns out they're everywhere. And they're a prime location for body dumping.
One of the things ESD did was recover dead bodies from mines.
And it wasn't just the mines. Corpses turn up all over these parts.
You know, if all the dead bodies that were up there from being deliberately disposed of stood up at once, they'd be shoulder to shoulder.
It's a chilling image of the area's darker side. Aujay would jog from the Devil's Punchbowl into the Angeles National Forest, which has been called the most dangerous national forest in America. Around the time of Aujay's disappearance, it's estimated that 2 to 3 dozen corpses turned up in the forest every year. And those were just the ones that were found. So Rathbun understands the danger he faces, but pushes on in search of footprints.
You have to look at the ground and look at bushes that have been pushed, and we walked and walked and walked and walked and walked and walked, and we generally don't give up until it's just ridiculous.
The search is taxing for Rathbun, physically and emotionally. Because he and Aujay were friends, and back in the early 90s, they were even partners.
If it was me that needed cover, he'd be there. I didn't even think about it. Someone you could definitely depend on.
Rathbun and Aujay spent a lot of time driving around together. But they didn't sit around riffing like partners in a buddy cop movie.
He was laconic, didn't have a lot to say unless you worked on him. And he was always kind of severe serious.
Aujay was hardly two-dimensional, though. He used his deadpan personality to mess with people.
He had this secret sense of humor, but it was really hard to tell which card he was playing, the funny card or the I'm Jon and I'm dead serious card.
One time, Rathbun and Aujay had to chase down a suspect. Rathbun was driving, and he ends up reversing down a one-way street. They got the guy, but Aujay looked pissed.
And he added that, "Dave, I need to talk to you."
Rathbun's gotten pretty good at impersonating Jon Aujay's baritone voice. He says he sounded a lot like Lurch from the Addams Family.
What you just did was a violation of California state law. And if you do something like that again, I'll have to write you up. Jon, we were chasing a suspect, and we are law enforcement officers, and so we get exemptions during those things. That may be true, but it was illegal. Is this Jon being funny? You would not know, and he will never let you know.
Aujay was hard to read. In fact, there's even confusion over the pronunciation of his last name. His family says Aujay, but to his friends,
it was Aujay, and he never corrected us, and he's not very bashful.
We'll never know why he didn't tell people how to pronounce his name, but it seems fitting for someone who remains a mystery to so many. Aujay was an enigma to just about everyone around him. So when he disappeared, he became an easy target for conspiracy theories. Stories began to circulate that Aujay's alive and well, living in Alaska. Others say Mexico. Some say he was recruited by a mercenary group or joined the CIA. These theories were fueled by weird comments Aujay had made to friends like Dave Rathbun.
Dave, yes, you guys think you can find people with your searches, and you think you're pretty good at it, right? I could go in the mountains and you'd never find me. And I said, there are people who want to be found that we can't find. So I'm not real impressed with your declaration there. If you don't want to be found, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be able to find you, so I agree.
And of course, that conversation takes on extra meaning as searchers keep coming up empty-handed.
I participated in that search until my feet were bloody, as did several of my peers. But day 6, they said, well, shut it down. What do you mean, shut it down? Oh, who said that? Who gave that order? Who shut this thing down? What are you talking about, day 6?
The sheriff's department folds the search after 6 days and gives a statement to the press. Sergeant Sauer, one of the deputies overseeing the operation, says, quote, "A good analogy would be someone coming up to you and giving you 2 to 3 pieces of a 500-piece puzzle and asking you to guess what the picture is. Throw into that a few pieces of an entirely different puzzle, and that is what we work with. We might never get it right." End quote.
You want to trust the department that they're doing the right thing, but no one asked us if we should shut it down. If I'm the search and rescue guy, and my partners are search and rescue guys, and the helicopter pilots have been on hundreds of searches, why are we asking them what they think and their input?
Rathbun says searches for missing hikers typically last 7 to 14 days, depending on the viability of the person. Aujay was not your typical hiker, and given his personal and professional connection to the sheriff's department, it seems like the LASD would go the extra mile to find him.
So it's 6 days, you cancel a search for somebody who can run 50 or 100 miles in the wilderness, really knows the wilderness as good or better than anybody in ESD. Shut it down. Why are you shutting it down?
The sheriff's department tells the public that Aujay disappeared without a trace, and that they're ending the search because they're just spinning their wheels. But behind the scenes, they're telling a very different story.
Well, they say that they decided he committed suicide.
Internal LASD reports claim that Aujay was distraught over his failing marriage and took his own life in the Punchbowl. That gunshot the area resident heard, that could have been the sound of Aujay just putting an end to it all. But the sheriff's department makes that determination without a body. They don't find any remains, blood, bullets, or a suicide note. Nothing. The only thing they think they may have found of Aujay's was an energy bar wrapper left on one of the trails. From what we can tell, there's not a lot pointing to suicide. So we reach out to Aujay's colleagues and friends to get their thoughts.
He was obviously down. He was obviously upset. But was it enough to commit suicide?
Sergeant Vince Burton is still on the fence. On the one hand, Aujay did appear torn up over his marital problems. On the other, he seemed to be coping.
Would you be telling me about your ultra marathon if you were just going to end it all? Would you even be planning to go run at the Punchbowl, which is an ugly area anyway.
For fact-checking purposes, we want to make clear, the Punchbowl is not ugly. But go on, Vince.
None of that made sense to me with the suicide.
For Aujay's running buddy, Randy Meggardly, there's no question.
Plain and simple. I think he killed himself. That's the only way I can explain it.
Because he says Aujay was acting strangely, even more strangely than usual, in the weeks before his disappearance.
He says, there's a bunch of caves and stuff out here. And you can pretty much disappear, I think was the word that he used, and nobody would ever find you.
Aujay said similar things to Dave Rathbun, but he didn't put a lot of stock into any of the statements because he says Aujay is just a weird guy.
Our unit was next to a big giant duck pond, and one of the ways we used to make jokes about each other is we kind of like, where do you fit in the duck pond? Jon was, and I don't want to malign him, but he was one of the oddest ducks in the pond, which is good, right? You need them. You don't want everybody swimming the same.
Initially, Rathbun was open to the possibility of suicide, but he's become increasingly skeptical over time. Because if Aujay had killed himself, he thinks his body or some trace of him would have turned up by now. So Aujay's colleagues are divided on what happened to him. It's kind of like those faces seen in the rocks at the Devil's Punchbowl. Same details, but interpreted in different ways. And that makes sense, because we feel conflicted about it too. Aujay did say some eerie things about disappearing, but this disappearing act would be pretty hard to pull off. I mean, how could he have buried himself and stay buried for almost 3 decades? Rathbun asked the sheriff's department to explain that one.
They said, well, we think he might have sat on the edge of one of those mines and blown himself into the mine. Thinking, okay, we are really stretching now for an explanation as to why we can't find him.
I didn't accept it. Just common sense told me, you probably ought to see whether there's any evidence of self-infliction.
Pissed off old cop Mike Bauer is evangelical in his belief that the suicide theory is bullshit. Because he says the sheriff's department didn't arrive at this conclusion. They led with it. And that poisoned the investigation from the start. Bauer says that as early as day 3, an LASD official was pushing the suicide narrative during search team briefings. To Bauer, this was equivalent to telling searchers to let up.
I took that person outside and I said, what in the hell did you say that for? How could you possibly know that at this point? How could you possibly discourage them to search for somebody that worked for you?
The sheriff's department was even sharing this theory with the press.
We haven't ruled out the possibility of suicide, but we don't have any evidence to support that that's what he came here to do.
Bauer thinks it's irresponsible to promote the suicide theory without a high degree of certainty. So he prods the department to keep investigating.
I kept contacting homicide and saying, something's wrong. I'm telling you, there's a problem.
But he says the department ignored the case to such an extent that he began to question their motives.
Nobody was in charge of it, and nobody wanted any of it once they saw how stinky it was getting.
Randy Meggardly represents the other end of the spectrum. So we ask him what he thinks about the possibility of foul play.
I refer to myself as a mushroom. They would just feed me a little bit of poop every once in a while. I wasn't in the know on that whole thing.
I've never heard the mushroom poop metaphor before.
Yeah, you feed you a little bit of poop and you grow a little bit.
At first, the mushroom poop analogy went way over my head. It sounded like a Southern expression my mom just forgot to teach me. But then it clicked while I was watching The Departed, the Martin Scorsese movie about corruption within the Boston Police Department.
My theory on feds is they're like mushrooms. Feed them shit and keep them in the dock.
I think what Meggardly is saying is that he doesn't ask a lot of questions because he prefers to be kept in the dark about things that don't concern him. And who can really blame him? I mean, law enforcement agencies are not exactly known for their culture of transparency.
That file, you'd have to get special permission to touch that file.
Dave Rathman, Aujay's former partner, says the sheriff's department is unusually protective of the Aujay case file.
And they don't even like to hear you talking about it. Well, to me, that's what you would call a red flag.
So Rathman asked his buddy, a retired detective working cold cases for the sheriff's department, to review the Aujay case.
Could you maybe grab that case file? And he went, oh no. I said, what do you mean, oh no? Why wouldn't you want to take a look at it? He said, no, that's a hot potato. No one's allowed to touch that. If I started poking around that case, they'd let me go. I said, well, that's interesting. Why? It's a suicide. He said, I don't know. I just know that case can't be touched.
Those red flags are another reason Rathman and others just can't get behind the party line.
As my father would say, God bless him, there's something rotten in the woodpile. And it stinks, and I can smell it.
And that brings us back to the poop mushroom. It might thrive in darkness, but to me, that's not an ideal environment for policing. I mean, the whole concept behind law enforcement is that watchful eyes deter crime, right? But who is watching the police? There's very little oversight of law enforcement agencies, and it's hard to hold them accountable since they control the collection and release of information about internal problems.
The philosophy of the sheriff's department is to hide it. And the philosophy of government, in a lot of respects, is that way now with the terrible way they handle public records requests and stuff. They just basically stonewall you. They give you the middle finger if you're asking for something that the public has a right to know.
Tell me about it, Bauer. We tried with those public records requests and got the proverbial middle finger. Without access to the information, it's hard for us to know how the sheriff's department handled the Aujay case. And we'd remain in the dark if it weren't for Mike Bauer and other deputies coming forward. Bauer retired in 2002 and has spent the better part of his retirement investigating Aujay's disappearance. And he's uncovered what looks like some pretty damning information about the sheriff's department.
They lied to me. They lied to me as a fucking captain of the fucking sheriff's department with 33 years on the job. They fucking lied to me. While I'm in charge of sheriff's intelligence, they're fucking lying to me about what they're doing at homicide to shut this thing up. They don't want me involved in it. Oh, imagine. That's how offensive that is.
We know that law enforcement has its problems, but they're not usually laid out for us by dyed-in-the-wool cops. People who know this world from the inside and can show us where the bodies are buried, figuratively speaking. We tell Bauer we want to do a deep dive on the Aujay case, beginning with his investigation.
You guys have stumbled into a cluster of shit.
But he's not as encouraging as we expect him to be. And for good reason.
Do you have any advice for us while looking into this disappearance?
I wouldn't do it alone. In the event somebody did decide that you were getting too close to something, you will not be found killed. You will simply disappear.
This season on Valley of Shadows.
Early on, I let the suicide theory sit at 50-50. As I've learned more and more, I'm at about 90-95 murder, 5 to 10% suicide.
The rumor around the drug scene was that a deputy stumbled onto something he shouldn't have, and he was taken care of.
I'm hearing shit on the street, man, that Aujay, he didn't commit suicide, he was murdered. I'm hearing it from more than one person.
Then I started hearing some rumors that there was a gun.
And yet, there's no indication that gun was ever booked into evidence.
If you ratted or they thought you were going to rat, it wasn't, hey, don't do that ever again. You're done. They got rid of you. So that's where the murders came in.
He was describing with his hands and his arms and his whole body where this cop was buried at.
In other words, it's not safe not because of criminals. It's not safe because of law enforcement. And there's nothing worse than that.
Hey, dude, we're getting like pretty far out in the middle of nowhere and no one knows we're out here.
You got to be careful where you go and who you talk to.
If you have any information or tips related to the disappearance of Jon Aujay, please call 213-262-9889 or email shadows@pushkin.fm. Valley of Shadows is reported, written, and produced by us, Hayley Fox and Betsy Shepard. Our editor is Diane Hodson. Our executive producers are Jacob Smith and Alexandra Garreton. Original music by Jake Gorski, Ray Lynch, Mike Jersich, and Hayden Gardner. Sound design by Jake Gorski. Fact-checking by Annika Robbins. Additional production support by Sonia Gerwig. And our show art was designed by Sean Carney and Betsy Shepard. Special thanks to Nick White for show art photography. Additional thanks to Jeremy Tao. Valley of Shadows is a production of Pushkin Industries. To find more Pushkin podcasts, listen on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. From Type 2 Fun, we're Hayley and Betsy. See you next week.
Thanks for listening, guys. A big thanks to Hayley and Betsy for joining us on Dakota Spotlight. Be on the lookout for season 13 of Dakota Spotlight soon. Stay safe out there, and I will see you next time.